Millions of people wake up in the morning not for a dream, but because they have to. They rush to jobs where they are not respected, stay late, complete tasks that are not their own, and learn to treat exhaustion as something normal. But this is only the surface. Beneath this everyday loyalty lies a system that, for decades, has quietly taught: if you try hard enough, if you endure, if you do not complain, eventually you will be noticed. But will you? With each passing year, you grow more tired, yet no closer to freedom. You work more and feel less meaning. Promotions go to others. Recognition never comes. Instead of gratitude, new pressure. Instead of rest, anxious, fragmented sleep. And the most frightening part, you begin to think that something is wrong with you. But perhaps it is not you. Perhaps you are living not your own life, but a script that benefits others. And if so, then the real question is no longer how to succeed, but why you are playing this game at all. You were taught to be proud of your exhaustion, not of your results, not of your freedom, not of your understanding of yourself, but of exhaustion itself. From an early age, you heard the same phrases: be patient, work builds character, be useful. You watched your parents come home drained and silent. You saw teachers reward obedience, not independent thinking. You grew up in a culture where labor is not a path towards something. It is the goal itself. Where pausing is labeled laziness and rest brings shame. You were trained to consider it normal when everything hurts, when there is no energy left in the evening to speak with loved ones, when months pass unnoticed. You may even take pride in this, because everyone around you seems just as worn down, just as resigned, just as silent. And this is the deepest trap. You stop asking why. You simply act because everyone else does, because deep inside lives the belief: if you are not exhausted, you did not try hard enough. If you have free time, you are useless. If you are not overwhelmed, you are losing your value. This way of thinking did not appear by accident. It was built into you across generations, through school, through military discipline, through factories, through offices. It is a system where the more you endure, the fewer questions you ask. And the fewer questions you ask, the more convenient you become. You turn into a cog. You do not squeak. You function. You wear out. You stay silent. But what if this entire structure is held together not by efficiency, but by fear? The fear of being useless. The fear that if you stop, you will disappear. Because your entire identity is tied to how much you produce, how much time you give, how indispensable you are. You begin to measure your worth in tasks completed, deadlines met, hours sacrificed. And when your body can no longer keep up, you blame yourself, not the system that burned you down to nothing. Remember how many times you forced yourself to continue. Through pain, through sleepless nights, through tears. For what? For a promise no one ever gave, that someday everything would change, that someone would finally see you, that it would become easier. But it does not become easier. Only the level of pressure changes. Carl Jung wrote that a person who constantly ignores their inner voice eventually encounters their shadow, the part of themselves they have rejected. And this shadow begins to scream, through burnout, through depression, through the loss of meaning. Yet you keep moving forward, because you were never taught how to stop. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You simply grew up in a culture where exhaustion is considered a virtue, where inner pain is seen as interference rather than a signal. But you have the right to pause, to ask, why am I doing all of this? For whom? And what would happen if I stopped proving my worth through exhaustion? Real work does not begin when you squeeze the last drops out of yourself. It begins when you first allow yourself to listen inward, work harder, and remain manageable. That is how the system operates. Not through open threats, not through support, but through quiet suggestion. If you want to survive, be convenient. Do more. Ask for less. Do not question. At first, you believe this is temporary, that you only need to push a little harder, show yourself, and then you will be seen. You hope someone will recognize your effort, your loyalty, your sacrifice. But everything remains the same, except your fatigue. You take on double workloads, cover extra shifts, accept urgent tasks, stay late, not because you want to, but because you are afraid. Afraid of losing your position, afraid of being replaced, afraid of becoming unnecessary in a world that values not people, but functions. This fear slowly becomes rules. You become controlled not through punishment, but through expectation, through a culture where the word forbidden is never spoken. It is simply felt. And now you regulate yourself. You push yourself. You force yourself to be faster, quieter, more disciplined. You stop being an employee, a specialist, a human being, and become a system of self-surveillance. These are the people the system loves most. Those who do not demand, but strive. Who do not protest, but adapt. Who do not argue, but apologize. But what have you been apologizing for all this time? For being tired? For not withstanding a load no one could endure? For wanting to live instead of merely surviving? You believe diligence will lead to freedom. Meanwhile, the system measures something else: how pliable you are, how easily another task can be placed upon you, how afraid you are to say no, how willing you are to remain silent when everything inside is already screaming. And if you do not scream, you are suitable. You can be used. There is no evil here in the usual sense. No one arrives intending to destroy your personality. It is simply a structure, a machine operating on the logic: less investment, more return. And the more diligent you are, the more effective you become for it. Your inner state does not concern it. Not because it is cruel, but because it does not exist within its calculations. Friedrich Nietzsche called this the morality of the slave, when obedience is turned into virtue. When being convenient means being good. When resistance is seen as danger, not as a right. Thus are formed generations of people who sincerely believe that the meaning of life is usefulness. To whom? They do not know. You are not a machine. You are not a tool. You do not have to be useful to deserve existence. Yet as long as you live by the logic, the more I suffer, the more I deserve, you remain in the position of the laity. Because true value begins not where you become indispensable, but where you become yourself. And that is an entirely different trajectory. Who planted in your mind the idea that suffering is the path to truth? This belief did not merely take root in culture. It became part of your thinking. You no longer notice how you live with the conviction: if it hurts, it is right. If it is hard, you must continue. If you feel empty, it means you have not yet reached the goal. This is not a random thought. It is a doctrine built through school, religion, and labor ethics. Suffering was sanctified. Rest was condemned. Joy was equated with idleness. Peace with weakness. And so you stopped trusting yourself. You began to believe that only through pain are you worthy of living. But this belief carries a heavy price. Because when meaning is tied to pain, you begin to seek suffering even where it is unnecessary. You choose difficult paths not because they are right, but because simple ones feel undeserved. You deny yourself support because you must manage alone. You do not ask for help because you see it as weakness. You endure even when everything inside collapses because you believe that only this way you can become better, purer, more needed. Jung wrote that a person who refuses to acknowledge their pain, weakness, and exhaustion does not become stronger. They become disconnected from themselves. They create a false self, built for external approval, but empty within. And the longer you wear this mask, the louder the voice of the shadow, the rejected part of you, will become. You tell yourself, I am ambitious, I am building a career, I am moving toward my goals. But if you are honest, deeper down you are not driven by inspiration. You are driven by fear. Fear of becoming nobody. Fear that if you stop striving, no one will remain beside you. Fear that you will not deserve love unless you are useful. This is not labor. This is compensation. That is why you cannot stop. Because in stillness, silence catches you. And in that silence lies truth. How tired you are, how lost you feel, how long it has been since you felt alive. The system taught you that this is normal, that it is part of the path, that endurance is necessary. But who said that suffering is the only way to be worthy? Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But that why must be yours, not inherited, not imposed, not dictated. Because chujoi smysl does not give strength, it gives only burden. You do not live, you carry. So who told you that pain is the path? Who convinced you that suffering purifies? And most importantly, who benefited from this belief? While you believe in the sanctity of suffering, you continue to obey, and you forget the most essential truth. You were not born to suffer. You were born to be. The system is not broken. It was designed this way, so that you would tire, but not question, so that you would stay busy, but not understand why, so that you would live by a template, yet believe it was your choice. This is not malfunction, it is function. It works perfectly as long as you fear losing income, depend on approval, monitor yourself, and deny yourself rest. You become a cog, and a cog is convenient, but you are not a part. You have feelings, dreams, inner needs. Yet the system evaluates only usefulness, and the harder you try, the more valuable you become to it, not as a person, but as a resource. You can be the best specialist, but if tomorrow you burn out or collapse, you will be replaced without drama. Because the system's goal is not your well-being, but its own operation. That is why it gives you hope, but not freedom. It promises future, without timelines. It offers just enough praise to keep you from leaving. This is controlled motivation. You cling to a possibility that is always just out of reach and continue to run. Psychologists call this the effect of the unfinished cycle. The mind cannot release a task that feels almost completed. The system exploits this. It feeds you phrases. Just a little more. Next quarter. Be patient. And you wait. A year. 2. 5. And eventually, you forget how to live otherwise. Jung said, "A person disconnected from themselves becomes vulnerable to manipulation. They lose inner ground. They adopt chujii tseli as their own. You no longer distinguish where your will ends and imposed programming begins, where your desire lives, and where external stimulus rules. The system does not need you to awaken, it needs you to function. But you can stop and ask, who truly benefits from my exhaustion? Who profits from my silence? Until you ask this, you remain in a game you never chose to play. Your value is not in sacrifice. Since childhood, you were taught to be good is to be convenient, to yield, to endure, to demand nothing, and you made pain a habit, silence a virtue, exhaustion a norm. You confused self-worth with usefulness. But the truth is simple. The more you give, the more is expected. The more you agree, the more you are used. The system will not stop. It will take as much as you allow, because to it, you are a resource, and resources are exploited to the limit, then replaced. Nietzsche called this the values of the weak, a morality of submission that glorifies sacrifice. But why should you be good by someone else's standards? Why must your inner self be offered up? Jung said, "A person who constantly denies their own needs loses contact with themselves. They may appear successful outwardly, yet feel empty within. They live not from desire, but from duty, not from freedom, but from fear. How many times have you agreed to what harms you? How many times did you remain silent when you needed to speak? How many times did you betray yourself in order to be accepted? And what did you receive in return? Fatigue, loneliness, the feeling of disappearance. You do not have to be everything for everyone. You do not have to prove your right to exist. You already exist. That is enough. True value is not measured by suffering. It exists before any approval. True strength is not endurance. It is awareness. Your life belongs to you. You have the right to boundaries. You have the right to be. Thank you for watching. I hope this gave you something to reflect on. Until next time.